I'm going on a few public forums this week and soon after because the detrimental robots of the lying press are mobilizing against me. They sent this bag boy to do a hit piece on me in Politico. You all saw it. And I hear there's more coming. Some guy at Washington Post, I hear, a malicious dwarf who is tingling for me, and he's mad I didn't give him attention. I hear a lot of other efforts too against me. I can't imagine what it must be like to be these journalists or that one girl who's trying to make a career writing about me. Can I ask these people, what is it like to have no ideas of your own and make your beat, well, to make your beat the pranks of others? There's movie The Lives of Others, but these guys, they make their beat the pranks of others. At least a Stasi goon had an excuse. He was ordered to obsess over this or that one case or dissident by a superior. But you journalists who come against me, assuming you're not equivalent of American KGB, but actually chose me as your beat. I suppose it's a compliment to have groupies like this. They see, like others, there are more ideas in one paragraph from my book, or in one tweet even, than they'll have in their lifetimes. So I suppose I should take it as compliment. I can't blame them. Of course, I prefer my genuine queens, my black and light-skinned queen fans. Thank you very much. My groupies, they love me and ask for nothing back. Hello, Michelle. Thank you for posing with my book. Nevertheless, I'd like in this show to discuss, well, not these journalist midgets in particular, but to return to political matters and tell you a little more about just how lame this pretend elite is, what a carnival of failure and how myopic. You know, Mugabe died this week, 2 days after I talk about him. What do you think that means? Well, in any case, he died, so I'll talk about this and how far back their abysmal failure goes. They had huge hand, not these people, but this general establishment elite had huge hand in the failure of Rhodesia and many other things. There are people completely out of their league, which is why Putin can punch so far above his weight. Why he's been humiliating them for over a decade, despite fact that Russia has economy at size of Italy. America is in trouble. Hillary Clinton, Victoria Nuland, Marie Harf. This is clown government. We are talking weaponized pantsuit government. This can't last much longer. And I'm telling you, no one in government, no one in the pundit class, no one in academia can call out any of this incompetence because they are all locked in social circles together. Liberal, centrist and conservative alike, they're all locked in social rings that are circling the drain together, and they'll take everyone down with them. I talk about this, their social loyalties, their social rings. These are their lives, their meal tickets. In the end, these are their blinders. When I said once that loyalty is the only political virtue that matters, and the lefty girl who admires my power, Anna Khachiyan, from some podcast read something, I don't know, she retweeted that and got a lot of trouble for it from Antifa. They said she was supporting fascism. Are you listening, Anna? Do not give in to them. Stay strong. You want to feel my biceps? But why was I saying that? Is it because I was promoting, as some claimed, a kind of fascist program of unquestioning loyalty or obedience to the state? You know, follow all orders and this kind of thing. But what state would that be? Why would I say that? If only people stopped thinking they live in movies from 1930s. They're role players, only role players all around us. No, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about observation I had from being, you can say, a kind of dissident, if I may call myself this, from observing groups active on the right and the left for at least a decade. The problem of loyalty arises to you naturally if you're part of any kind of political action, even in your workplace. You know this, I imagine it's the same. And you start to notice after a while, as a dissident, that it's really the only thing that matters. You can only really trust your friends. That is to say, specifically, not your ideological allies, not people who mouth the same beliefs you might have. Not people who claim to have the same interests. This is a guarantee of nothing. Those things can change and they can be faked. Also, when ideologically correct people express especially orthodox positions, then really I advise you to watch out. It's like a kind of like a hello fellow nationalists, or so on the other side, hello fellow Leninists kind of thing. I'm sure lefties have noticed the same on their side. That's why we have the anime, among other things, and many other similar peculiarities, because it keeps the entryists and the fakers out. I scared them off with, for example, Dominated by Dog. You can Google this story. I've saved so many of you with that story. Do you know how many of these federale trad girls deleted their accounts when I sent them that story? They realize, like a friend said, that they are lost in werewolf country at night with no flashlights and no map. Anyone can say anything. That means nothing. In fact, ideology is often used to splinter dissident movements. Let me give you counter example of what loyalty means and why it's valuable. Delicious Tacos, this writer and poster, you know him. He is a friend of mine. We've met. He's a friend and I trust him, even though I don't even think he's on the right at all. I think he's probably a leftist. And not an extreme leftist by any means. At most, you can say we share a dissatisfaction with the heaviness of life in America, but then who doesn't? But the point is, I know him and trust him, and that's more valuable to me than any supposed ideological alignment. Friends I've had in these circles for many years who don't freak out, who aren't changeable in their loyalties, them I know I can trust. That's what I meant. Only that can be the beginning of any real project. I mean loyalty, not ideology. Loyalty and friendship. As long as we share some general aims, or at least one crucial aim, we're all quite tolerant of each other's ideological deviations, personal differences. Because in the end, this matters so little. Ideology, I think, is something to be scoffed at. You see, we all keep the establishment in our line of sight. We know who the bad guys are. And that's all that matters. Don't lose sight of what matters. Ideological disputes are a distraction. Flaunting your ideological self-identification, like the true conservatives did before Trump, attempting to call yourself, for example, I'm an integralist, I'm a neo-Evolan imperialist, I'm an anarcho-syndicalist, and all these things. This is narcissism. And it's exploited by bad people who want us to engage in these faggoty fights instead of keeping our aim on the establishment, on discrediting and ridiculing the authorities. Keep eyes on aim. And then, on the other side, I mean the partisans and flunkies of the establishment, consider for a moment their position. The reason I made this tangent now, because on the other side, it's the same. It doesn't matter if they're conservative, liberal, or whatever. And they needn't have thought things out as explicitly as I've said here, but they're all locked in together in loyalties and friendships of varying degrees, and they share aims. Most of all, the aim of preserving the privileges of the establishment, of securing and then keeping their sinecures and such. But they share not only aims, as a result of their social milieu, they share even a way of thinking and a way of seeing. They're all locked into the public relations mindset, for example. For this reason, a supposedly right-wing ideologue like Ross Douthat and many lesser but equally fat copies of him who are journalists, they share a lot more with the left-wing journalists than with any dissident or any normal average supporter of Trump, because they're all locked into the same social system. Ross Douthat, for example, is just one social degree removed, if that, from the demented bureaucrat and never-Trumper Victoria Nuland, who was recently, I believe, this will be shown, she was recently the point man for the Russia hoax coup attempt. And yes, I know who their social contact is, and many other social contacts, and maybe someday soon I'll just say all the names here on air to expose their dirty little games, them and many others. Well, spooks can't help being spooks. Stasi can't help being Stasi. But I'm getting annoyed, I think, thinking of this. I must switch to a different matter for a moment. Let me talk movies for a moment. I have problems sometimes with apartment building that Roman Polanski described in movie. There is new Polanski movie about a Dreyfus affair. I'm not sure I'll watch it. He's becoming too self-conscious, too eager for a legacy, which is strange because artistically he already has a legacy, but now he's starting to perform for the critic class, to be their monkey. This is always very bad for an artist when they make this turn. It's much better when he was self-absorbed in his personal demons. You've seen Polanski movies, Roman Polanski, Chinatown. He has Apartment Trilogy, a story of things that happened to me. I'm sorry, by the way, in a way, to mention him to you, because I know most of you disapprove. He is surely a child sexual abuser. No doubt. But even so, fate gives us so few genuine artists. And some of his movies are genuine art and can't just be dismissed. I try to look beyond the vices of an artist if he's genuine. Historically, Rousseau was a terrible man who abandoned his children. But he's a great author. You cannot ignore him. The question in that case would be if a philosopher of that kind, like Rousseau, designs his thoughts to justify his actions. But even then, for that to be true, for his philosophy to be merely a cope rationalization, you have to assume he's bothered by his actions as a normal man would be. And I'm not sure that's true. I think people like Rousseau are like spiders. In the case of an artist like Polanski, it's easier to enjoy his movies, not thinking about the man or his foibles, because there is no clear link and no clear moral content. And you know, in a case like his movie The Ninth Gate, it may even be that he's trying to expose his dirty companions. In that movie, I don't know if you saw it, he added a scene in that movie, The Ninth Gate, that was not in the book. There was a scene of satanic ritual, very similar to Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick movie. Why he do this? But my favorite is the Apartment Trilogy. The three movies, Repulsion, The Tenant, and Rosemary's Baby, which is the best known. Repulsion is older movie, very nice, has Catherine Deneuve playing a psycho French cosmetician running around streets of London. This is, by the way, the kind of girlfriend I want. Are you listening? If you're a genuine, paranoid, introverted, schizophrenic girl, get in touch with me. Slide into my DMs, please. Anyway, in The Tenant, the third installment of this apartment trilogy, Polanski plays himself. He is main character, and he is oppressed. And ultimately, he is sissified and mummified by his neighbors in an apartment building. This is what fascinated me about this film trilogy. I saw my own experiences in it because I've always felt oppressed and persecuted by this kind of association of people in apartment buildings. It's common for many of our friends to complain about isolation, loneliness in modern society, and for sure there can be such a thing as a crushing loneliness, an alienation, sure. But for me, the much more serious and frequent threat has been community, forced community, and being watched like an animal. My landlady once was an old Sephardic woman. She was descended from Moroccan Jews who went to the Amazon 100 years ago for the rubber trade. And she was in some ways a nice, sweet woman. And I have to say, in all money matters, in ammonia, she was very forthright with me. But in other ways, she was the matriarch of this building and had accumulated around herself a whole solar system of very strange detritus, very strange tenants, who never stopped tormenting me, never stopped their intrusions into my privacy. A couple of them were ex-whores. And I have a friend who says, I think he's right, he says, there is no such thing as ex. Ex doesn't exist. There is no ex-gay. There's no ex-whore. And indeed, one touched my thigh, even though she was married and supposedly personality reformed. But she never stopped trying to convert me to Pentecostalism. I went with her once to a Pentecostal church where I tried to rile myself up into emotional pitch and to do the whole trance thing with the shaking hand. But mostly she tried to do the hand on thigh thing when we were alone. Or she tried to get me to smoke pot with her alone. I didn't do. And there were stranger people there still. A fat cousin she was a very strange man, had something around his lips, and they tried to rope me into taking him out for pizza, all you can eat, this kind of thing. Just, I couldn't escape these people. I would go to pay my rent, or I would go there with a question about maintenance or repairs, and I'd be forced to come in and sit down and listen to pile-driving blather for half an hour, these old women. And the worst part of this so-called community, do you like this? Does this sound comfy to you, comfortable to you? You like this community? The worst part are the doormen in these buildings. You see, these doormen, and they always have a relationship with the doorman who will watch your every move. They report what you do, or they always try to start some chit-chat. You're trying to leave, they stop you. And frequently they try to get something out of you. One of them was a blackie, and I don't mean light skin. The guy was full-on ebony Yoruba blue gum, okay? And he has these bulging, shifty eyes, a kind of goofy eyes that always look right and left. And the guy, within a week of my moving there, he tells me he's getting married and asks if I want to contribute to the building gift fund for his marriage. It was because of one night late after I had gone on a round of the whore nests and I brought him back a snack or pastry from late night shop. It's always good to be kind to staff or bribe them in the beginning. But he took this as an entry to ask for more. And I kept putting off the gift, but somehow because of this, he kept upping the game. He became more aggressive, more intrusive, giving me advice about the neighborhood, always with a kind of threatening edge. And I just couldn't escape it. And this was in the beginning. I had no idea at this point if the landlady was a good woman or no. So between this awful doorman and the freak show in her apartment, One night, I came in with some figs, and she just assumed it was a gift for her. Oh, thank you very much. I'll take those figs. I love them. You see, she bullied me, okay? But between all of this and the aggressive doorman, I started to suspect there was a plot against me, that they might do anything, that they might. I started to sleep with a knife under my pillow during this time, okay? You know, Schopenhauer designed a pulley so that a gun could be suspended above his bed, a gun so that he could, upon waking up, forthwith shoot at the door of his bedroom if he so needed. I think this is a genius German philosopher invention. I need something like this pulley system. I'm under constant attack. During 1848 revolutions, he invited police into his apartment to shoot at troublemakers from the window. It's a terrible feeling to wake up in this kind of dream where you think you grabbed the knife from under your pillow, but you never did. Well, it never came to that, okay? I started to drop hints, both to the landlady and this to nosy doorman. I started to drop hints to let them know that I was onto them, but that I didn't care, that I was above their games, that they couldn't touch me with their dirty plots. And I think at that point they backed off after that, but I understand exactly the kind of oppression you see in these Polanski movies, where the tenants' associations and community and such, where they try to crush you. The longhouse takes many forms. In modern world, the longhouse, the home is a place of filth. The community, the village is a place of filth. The public relations locked establishment is promoting this guy Buttigieg. I don't know how you say his name, Buttigieg. It's a huge mistake on their part. I heard this guy, Jacob Wohl. I don't mean to pile on him. He might be a good boy. I don't know. But he was apparently trying to find someone to Me Too Buttigieg, because he, along with other DC operatives, thought Buttigieg was a huge threat to Trump. It's not important. I'm only using this as example to show you this is the blinders that I am talking about. These people are locked into thinking this way, conservative and liberal alike. They see Buttigieg and they think in public relations mindset, they think this phrase straight out of central casting. They repeat, I assure you, they repeat these phrases: veteran, small town mayor, Midwest, Heartland America, masculine gay, family man, oh my god, upends stereotypes, unites X, Y, and Z voting blocks, and so on. This what they think in their heads when they think Buttigieg. It's all completely autistic public relations advertising thinking. This kind of Washington DC thinking, the same kind that led, for example, after Obama's win, it led the GOP, the Republican old man, the clueless old man, to think stuff like promoting Bobby Jindal. Remember him? Now, because golly duh, what if we had our own colored fella? And in this, yes, I'm copying Michael Savage. Savage is great. This is his phrase, but he's right. It's this kind of ham-handed thinking that's common on both sides. Bill Kristol, who is a man of entirely pedestrian IQ, and Bill Kristol, most often because of his relatively low IQ and little imagination, he most often falls back on this kind of thinking because he can't reason or perceive things for himself. This is why he ends up making a fool of himself so often. He thinks in these cookie cutter ways. He can only think in this kind of Washington, D.C. cliche, post-Madison Avenue way. For example, when Trump attacked the football league, the NFL, because the nostril football players were shitting on the viewers at home. And Crystal went into this DC public relations mode. You see, he was sure Trump would lose this one. On this one, Trump would finally lose. Why? Going against the burgers, sports is unconscionable. Un-American, you can't go against sports, don't you know? You red-blooded American Christians, you're supposed to love sports. Don't you just love football? You like football and guns, don't you, American red-blooded Christian men? So now, because you love football, you must hate Trump, right? I mean, this is how they think. So, of course, he made fool of himself. It's the same as Spike TV. So what was Spike TV? Some gay Hollywood guy's notion of what straight guys must have liked. So they completely miss the point. Normal people, they look at Buttigieg, this presidential candidate, they don't see what Washington, D.C. sleek public relation guys do. Guys who have thick blinders on. They're all locked into not noticing how abnormal this Buttigieg type is for the vast majority of Americans. And not just Americans, I mean people anywhere, because the aversion to Buttigieg is natural. You know, you can only get over the gag reflex to a Buttigieg through heavy self-denial of your own instincts and tastes. Like if you had to force yourself to eat insects, or to pretend that Afghanistan can be turned into Switzerland. And if you say otherwise, if, like Edward Luttwak, you go into one of these meetings and you say you can't turn the Afghans into the Swiss, in that case you get called racist, you get kicked out of the decision-making process in DC. So when you're part of this social circle, like all the media is, like all the journalists left and right are, that kind of social pressure just erases nature from your mind. You can no longer see things as they are. But you see, Buttigieg is more disturbing to a normal American than, let's say, a gay, queenie guy would be. I think that a gay, effeminate, queenie guy, by now most people would be, if they're not okay with that, then at least they're tolerant, at least they're understanding. But a so-called masculine gay of this type, Buttigieg isn't exactly masculine. It's something else. It sets off serious psycho alarms for most people not caught up in the veil of delusion of this pseudo-polite society. He comes off on the Jeffrey Dahmer spectrum. And that's a far more disturbing homosexual type than the Queen. I may talk about this another time, but among homosexuals, the so-called gay top, excuse me for talking such things, but this isn't a family show after all, but the so-called gay top is far more disturbing than the queenie effeminate gay. I'm not talking here about what Steve Saylor has named predatory bisexuality or this, or what the Afghans do, or what you find in the Gulf Arab states, or the ancient Greeks. But I'm talking in the West about a gay guy who's exclusively gay, but a so-called gay top. And not by circumstance, but by type, whether born fucked up or twisted by some experience. They're usually twisted, these types. I'll probably have to explain this in writing because there's too much detail here. And this is easy to misunderstand. But this is, by the way, key also to unlocking personality of very evil elite types in, let's say, Catholic Church faggot hierarchy. Not the old original church, but the ones who have taken over since Vatican II. The ones who are protected by Pope Faggot. And many others like Ross Douthat, who try to modulate Catholicism in America, who are not real Catholics. And not just them, but many others in the elite. They have within them an evil desire to derail to subvert, to sully, to take things that are healthy and make them unhealthy. But in shorthand, if I can try to explain to you this type, is you must think through the psychology of a man who wants to only fuck other men, but not women, who can't fuck women, but wants only to put it to men or to boys, to despoil them. You have to think through the psychology of this type to understand, to realize how disturbing it is. It's on the serial killer spectrum if you really think it through. An effeminate gay who wants to be sexually dominated is different. It's actually easier to understand. And relative to this other second kind is actually healthier. The butt gig type, the Ross Douthat type, is far more twisted, far more dangerous. And well, Buttgig, I have no idea what he likes in private. I don't know him. But he comes off on the cannibal Dahmer spectrum. And that's the vibe he gives off to most normal people. I mean, if you want to know the rumors about Frank Luntz as well. But even in his externalities, in Buttgig's externalities, which to the polite Washington, D.C. and public relations class, all of his external qualities are such a plus. But in all of these externalities, Dahmer, Buttgig, comes off to normal people as too much, as a kind of perverse desire to conform, to impersonate the characteristics of the red-blooded American persona. It's like David French, who talks so much of his military service when he was in fact just a desk jockey. It comes off as try-hard and gay. Who knows? It might work. It worked in the case of Obama. But at least he did a half-good job at pretending to be a straight black guy. At least good enough to fool some of America anyway. They didn't know linebacker Michael Michel pegged him. I don't know if it's called pegging. Is it pegging if it's a real cock? I don't know. This is getting too much. But you'll get the leaders you deserve. But I do think Buttgig won't go anywhere. He sets off the alarm for most Americans pretty badly. And that out of loyalty to each other, that infects even their perceptions. The entire DC class, right and left, is blind to this. They don't see what he is to others, but very good. Apollo puts a veil over the eyes of our enemy and help us. Yes, I will have to talk about this in writing. So many lies and misunderstandings about the whole gay thing, especially in the ancient world. Never believe their lies. A modern homo in ancient Greece would be an outcast without voting rights, without any kind of rights at all. I'm not sure people realize this even on our side, but I need to say a word about it. You have this latrine monger Jeet Heer, a journalist who was scoffing at conservatives' adulation of ancient Greece, supposedly because they don't understand that ancient Greeks were gay or something. Even if that were true, I don't see the connection. A conservative is probably aware of ancient Greek habits, but considers them a sin or vice, not essential to what made that society great. And the normal conservative thinks, probably, that the Greeks achieved much in spite of that vice. This, at any rate, would be the conservative position. But Jeet Heer and Anderson Cooper, it isn't just that they did not have any rights in ancient Greece. I mean, even beyond that, they'd have gotten simply crushed because of their personality, their social behavior. Okay, forget the law. The men there would have crushed them. Can you imagine being a Jeet here? Look at the guy, a blob creature out of New Delhi sulfur pits. I feel so bad for my Sanskrit friends. I have a few. I can't imagine how they must feel with this Dasa tub of lard as a representative of their nation. Greek men wouldn't have tolerated them, not in the slightest. I'm not sure if people know the customs of that time. A modern homo in ancient Greece wouldn't be allowed to vote, would not be allowed to speak in public, to hold any public office. If you want the information on this, there is ancient court case against Timarchus by Aeschines, a speechwriter, that you can read, that makes clear what the Athenian law was on all such matters. If you were debauched at any point in your life, even against your will, you lost all political rights. It seems cruel to us. Even if it happened to you as a child, you lost all political rights. Furthermore, there would have been tremendous pressure, even on queenie gays of whatever kind, to get married and have children. This isn't to say, by the way, that their sexual habits wouldn't have been bizarre to a modern man, but they would have been just as foreign to a modern homo and far more hostile. It was assumed that a guy like Buttigieg, a guy who looked like that, or like Anderson Cooper, was by definition a traitor and a puppet who lacked sovereign judgment. A modern straight guy, by contrast, would be okay in an ancient Greek city. I mean, just if you consider the sexual habits. Of course, most modern men, for other reasons, are spiritually faggots anyway. They're dominated by their wives or such. Some are pegged. Many are cuckolded by Swedish and Cuban bodybuilders. Their wife cuckolds them with this. Many are soft, doughy, and submissive crapsters who worship other men playing sports with no conception of courage or a physical life. But if you just consider sexual habit, a modern straight guy would be okay in an ancient Greek city, but a modern gay not so much. This is the contrast people don't understand. They would lose all citizenship rights, and then if they went around, of course, flaunting their so-called habits, even worse. The penalty in ancient Athens for the seduction of a freeborn boy, for example, was death. Not sure if people know this. Ancient Greeks would have been so very entirely hostile to the very idea of a gay, which is this kind of grown man who acts like a little girl or something, that the gay, especially of the so-called masculine butt-jig variety, would at best be a carnival freak in that society, and most likely he'd get the Afghan treatment. The ancient Greeks were not that different from the modern Afghans, maybe a little bit more refined, except maybe in Boeotia, maybe not even that, but they were on the same kind of barbarians at heart as the Pashtun, believe me. Don't believe the lies they're inventing now about the ancient Greeks, about the Vikings, trying to reinterpret all these peoples in the image of modern Redditors. The very polite males of our time, Buttigieg or Don Lemon aside, just your average polite Western male would be promptly turned into beast of burden if they showed up in any ancient city, or into a carnival show. You know, Mitt Romney would be turned into a bachabazi, okay? In Peter Strzok, in Mueller, in Obama, Romney or McCain, in Victoria Nuland, Anthony Weiner. Why do I say these names? Wherever you look, at the visible heights at least of this demented regime, what you have are role players, overgrown children, unserious people. The comparison of their characters or habits to those of statesmen of any previous times makes as much sense as comparing residents of nursing home to Antarctic explorers, okay? It's Capricorn One Nation, public relations nation, where nothing is real. with the death of Mugabe comes to a sorry end the story of Rhodesia, of the failure called Zimbabwe now. I'll have to do a future show just on this, to devote a whole show to this history. There are some readings I can suggest. Moldbug has a good entry on it. Some say it's his best on the history of Rhodesia. You can also look up Theodore Dalrymple, a very good journalist, his real name Anthony Daniels. Here I only want to say one thing. The Rhodesians refused to let England bully them. England basically wanted to give them over to black rule because England back then, as well as now, was run by homosexual pinko commies. So the Rhodesians said no thank you very much. They declared independence, they founded a republic. And they fought hard to preserve the country their fathers had settled and built. Because know this, there is no nation there of any kind without the Rhodesians. Salisbury was a first world city. You had a case where they never lost a battle, and they wiped out forces many times their size without losing any man, and did all kinds of amazing military feats. Look up the history of the Silas Scouts, which were integrated, by the way. But the country ceased to exist anyway. And that can happen when you have the entire world against you. It doesn't matter how good your soldiers are in that case. I told you a couple of shows ago about the end of the Portuguese Empire. Well, that happened in 1975, and Rhodesia lost its only friend in that region, Mozambique and Angola, on which Rhodesia largely depended for access to the outside world, and to trade they suddenly turned hostile. Because in 1975 there was Carnation Revolution when communists took over Portugal state. I'm exaggerating a little, but commie army officers. And they unilaterally ended a 500-year-old empire. Again, not because they were losing any wars, but because their allegiances were elsewhere. America, the Soviet Union, China, England were already hostile and trying to end Rhodesia. So after Portugal went, it lost its last thread of support. I spoke once to someone who served in Carter administration. He was hardly a cock, hardly a liberal, but he dismissed Rhodesia as just an apartheid state. When that kind of thinking infects everyone, what do? Israel is trying desperately to stop the same thing from happening to itself right now. And the weird part of it, South Africa, who you would have expected to be a friend of Rhodesia, well, it was not a friend. South Africa felt that it would be safer and stronger by ending Rhodesia, for all kinds of reasons, but most of all because they thought black tribes in the area would be easier to play divide and conquer with than Ian Smith was. So, you know, in the end, this is what happened. Rhodesia ended, they ran out of petrol, out of oil and fuel. A loser like Mugabe, who got his snot kicked in on every engagement, could thereafter anyway portray himself as a Bolivarian liberator and such. It said he had a rubber member, by the way, that having had his natural one blown off, rubber dick, okay? Forget that most of the tribes in that area, including the Matabele, who he genocided after taking power, they did not accept his rule, so that he could hardly be called a nationalist liberator of any kind. No, instead what this whole Rhodesia episode shows is that, like French Algeria, it was one of the most concrete examples of suicide of Western civilization. But what is this suicide? Because the Rhodesians themselves, they did not lack will. They were not suicidal. The problem then, as now, was this sect, not in Rhodesia, but in the capitals of the great Western powers. A sect that has infected all Western governments. A sect that never sleeps. Never believe it was anomie or carelessness or apathy that led to the end of Rhodesia and the subsequent clown abuses of those like Mugabe, or the Mugabes they're trying right now to impose on us in Europe and the Americas. It was formerly known as communism. This is how it passed itself off, but it doesn't matter what you call it. You've seen those like Harry Dexter White. The FDR administration was full of them. He was exposed by Venona Papers as a Soviet asset. But the FDR administration was all people like Harry Dexter White. The John Birch Society was right about everything. A complete infestation of American and West European governments by a criminal cartel. None of the great disasters of the last century, nor the attempts to overthrow civilization today through mass migrations, none of this is an accident. It is this sect that never sleeps, and unfortunately, without a sect of our own, without a mafia of our own, there is no way out of this. A funny story before I close up for today. You want to hear about a witch hunt. Mueller and Comey previously teamed up to persecute Stephen Hatfield for the anthrax mailings after 9/11. It was a total witch hunt. There was no evidence, and ultimately the government had to pay him something like $6 million because of their insane persecution of this man. But do you know why they went after him after Hatfield in the first place? He was a biologist for the government labs, and he was a Rhodesian. America, that is, appreciated him and used him while he helped them fight the Soviets in 70s, in times like that. But in the later part of his life, his rewards and the reward of Rhodesians was to be accused of these vile crimes, the anthrax thing that he had nothing to do with, and to be singled out because of his national background. Because he was part of a nation and an allegiance that was now déclassé and considered suspect by the American deep state. A convenient target, because now a fashionable one. And I'm surprised Tucker Carlson hasn't had Hatfield on his show, because much could be made clear for the American people about the character of Comey, of Mueller, and indeed of the agencies they represent, of the American deep state as such. Much could be made clear too about how America treats its friends. I forget who it is who said, America is getting a reputation for being harmless to enemies and treacherous to friends. And the story of Stephen Hatfield, the story of Rhodesia, shows this better than anything else. Lack of loyalty. To be known as disloyal is the end of you politically.